We're about to dive into one of the most unbelievable environmental stories of the 20th century. It's a story about a sea that literally vanished, leaving behind a desert, rusting ships, and honestly, a massive warning for all of us. This is the story of the Aral Sea's collapse.
Okay, just take a second and let that sink in. Not some regional pond, not a small lake. We're talking about the fourth largest inland body of water on the entire planet. And then, in just a few decades, poof, it was basically gone. So the big question we have to ask is how on earth could something that massive just disappear?
To really grasp what was lost, we've got to go back in time. We need to see what the Aral Sea was before the disaster, when it was a thriving, bustling oasis.
Back in the 1960s, the Aral Sea was absolutely immense. We're talking 68,000 square kilometers of water. It was this vibrant ecosystem, the very heart of the region. It supported a huge fishing industry and entire communities that built their whole lives around its shores. For everyone there, it wasn't just a lake, it was a vast inland ocean.
So what happened? Where did it all go wrong? Well, the answer lies in this massive, incredibly ambitious and, as it turns out, catastrophic agricultural plan. It was a huge gamble for a commodity they called white gold.
You know, on paper, the plan kinda made sense. This was classic Soviet-era thinking. Set a massive goal to become a top cotton exporter. But to grow cotton in the desert, you need a ton of water. So they decided to divert the two mighty rivers that fed the Aral Sea. But here's the fatal flaw in the plan. The canals they built were disaster. They were so leaky and inefficient that a huge amount of water just evaporated or soaked into the ground. It never even got to the cotton fields, and the Aral Sea was basically starved of its only source of life.
The effect of that decision wasn't instant, but it was absolutely inevitable. The sea, cut off from its rivers, just began to shrink, and the speed at which it happened is, well, it's pretty hard to believe.
This timeline is just staggering. The diversions kick off in the 60s. By the 1980s, that's only 20 years later, the single massive sea had already shattered into smaller, separate lakes. Fast forward to the 2000s, and it's just a ghost of its former self. This wasn't some slow, natural process. This was a man-made catastrophe happening in fast forward.
And this chart, wow, this really drives the point home. It wasn't just the edges of the sea that pulled back. The entire volume of water collapsed. By the early 2000s, 90% of the water was just gone. Think about that, 90%. It's like draining almost an entire bathtub and leaving just a puddle at the bottom.
And as the water disappeared, all the salt and minerals that were naturally in it got left behind. They became super concentrated. The little water that remained became so salty it was basically toxic. The fish, the plants, the whole aquatic ecosystem that had been there for centuries, it just couldn't survive. It was a chemical collapse right on the heels of the physical one.
But the tragedy didn't stop at the water's edge. Nope. What was left behind created a brand new, terrifying environmental problem, one that could ride the wind.
Meet the Aral Sea, the Aral Desert. It's one of the world's newest deserts, created completely by human action on what used to be the bottom of the sea. And this isn't just regular sand. This ground is laced with decades of chemicals from agricultural runoff.
And here's the really scary part. When the wind whips across the Aral Sea, it picks up this toxic cocktail. We're talking salt, chemical fertilizers, and potent pesticides. These massive dust storms then carry that poison for hundreds of kilometers, damaging crops and causing serious health problems like respiratory illnesses for the people living nearby. The disaster was now airborne.
But this wasn't just about the environment or health statistics. At its very core, this was a profound human tragedy. The entire social and economic fabric of the region was completely shredded.
0. That's the number. The once mighty fishing industry, an industry that employed tens of thousands of people, was totally and utterly wiped out. The source of jobs, food, and identity for generations of families, gone. Vanished right along with the water.
This image might just be the most haunting symbol of the Aral Sea disaster. Giant fishing trawlers, once part of a huge, busy fleet, now just sit and rust in a sea of sand miles and miles from any water. They're like these giant, silent monuments to a lost world.
It's a truly devastating question to think about what happens. Mass unemployment, economic ruin, people are forced to leave homes their families have had for generations. It's a loss of purpose, a loss of identity that sends ripples down through the community for years and years. That is the human cost of all this.
So why should this story from Central Asia matter to the rest of us today? Because the Aral Sea isn't just some historical tragedy we can look back on. It's a living lesson and a pretty stark warning for the entire globe.
Now, there is a small glimmer of hope. In the northern part of the sea, a project called the Koka-Aral Dam has actually led to a partial recovery. Water levels have risen a bit, salinity has dropped, and some fish have even come back. But this success really just highlights the tragedy of the South, which has had no real help and just continues to shrink. It proves that recovery is possible, but man, it is difficult, it's expensive, and it's far from a complete fix.
If there's one thing to take away from all this, it's this. When we manage our most precious resource, water, with a short-term, production-at-all-cost mindset without thinking about the long-term balance of the environment, the consequences can be absolutely catastrophic. And sometimes, they're irreversible. The Aral Sea is the ultimate tragic proof of that.
And that leaves us right here with this question. Similar fights over water are happening all over the world right now. You can look at the Colorado River in the US or other major river basins across the globe. The story of the Aral Sea is a powerful, cautionary tale written across an entire desert. So the real question is, are we actually listening to what it's telling us?